From beautiful Bob Remus to one of the most hated villains in wrestling history to one of the most beloved heroes in wrestling history to the first ever living G.I. Joe, Yo Joe, to an Iraqi sympathizer to winning his country back and everything in between, Bob Remus, aka Sergeant Slaughter, one of the most iconic wrestlers in professional wrestling history, Yo Joe. I'm John Reckton with my review of WWE on A&E Biography, WWE Legends on Sergeant Slaughter. I was really looking forward to this, and I'm happy that I was finally able to sit down and watch it. I apologize for this review not being up earlier, but because this was being broadcast at the time that AEW Revolution was happening, and I was really tired, I reviewed that. Then I reviewed Raw. I worked a lot yesterday. I just got to it now. And this was pretty goddamn good. This was probably the one I was most looking forward to of this season, even though the season's not going to be all that long. I think it's going to be like 6 to 8 episodes. They're kind of running out of people to talk about without getting into the most seedy underbelly parts. But there was some good footage and a lot of stuff about family. And Sarge really does seem like a really good guy. He's one of the guys that I loved when I first got into wrestling. And I love the G.I. Joe stuff, but we'll talk about that. But let me know what you guys had to say about this particular one. I'm curious what you guys feel they should have included. Should they have taken some stuff out? I'm curious. So, yeah, one of the biggest heels faces in territorial wrestling, especially as the territories are getting more cable coverage and more crossover. You know, I just fucking love the fact that, like, they include so much archival footage. The G.I. Joe stuff, the family, the fact that, you know, him and his wife did love each other and that the business was his mistress and it led to their divorce, but not the dissolvement of their union, so to speak. And just all that stuff. It was a nice wraparound story. So we start in Burlington, North Carolina. Don't know where the fuck that is. So sitting on the porch with some coffee, just enjoying life. He's born in Minnesota on a farm. Family got tired of doing farm work, that is. Dad started a roofing business in Minneapolis. His sister is still alive. Good for her. He remembers watching wrestling with his dad at age 3 or 4. I remember watching wrestling at age 4. I'm trying to remember if it was at my house or if it was when I was being babysat. I'm really trying to remember here. But I did love seeing the black and white footage. And those rings had no give. There's just flat ground. They're just landing on goddamn concrete, literally. He was an athletic kid. He was a bigger kid than normal, and he was picked on because of his lazy eye. He had to have a bigger lens to fix that. And then, you know, because he had the big chin, they were making fun of him, calling him cow face, stuff like that. But he had football success. He loved, being able to do some amateur wrestling, but he felt it should have ropes. He couldn't quite grasp the concept of pro and amateur differences. Met at the time, soon to be his wife Diane, when he was working at a barber shop. There was a 3-year age difference. They hit it off. He loved her, she loved him, and they married the day after she turned 18. You know what? I'm just not going to even go into the stuff about that. Whatever, they seemed okay with it. Roofing work with his dad, Greg Gagne, chimes in. As pretty much the only living Gagne. I mean, because God forbid if his mother was still alive, she'd be like 200 years old. See the farmhouse on a lake. I forget what the lake was. Billy Robinson was a bit of a prick, shall we say. Really great wrestler. And he tried to break, Sarge's ankle. I don't know him as Bob Remus, so I will only reference him as that when the family does. I don't know him personally. But he tried to break Sarge's ankle, and he snapped, and Vern basically had to step in and stop it and said, hey, you want to get into wrestling, contact me. Because that was impressive, because Vern put over Billy Robinson in interviews, and especially in the AWA biography, and all that stuff. And it was great, because we find out this split view of Sarge wanting to pursue wrestling. And his wife, Diane, she loves him. She understood that he was really into wrestling, but she wasn't. She didn't like wrestling at all. So the farmhouse training footage, it was good to see. I don't know why I never put two and two together. That was Sarge training. And he was training with, Vern. You got to learn how to fall. If you don't, you get hurt. And if you're hurt, you can't work. And if you can't work, you don't eat. Simple as that. Or somewhere to that effect. Diane wanted to make the best of it, wanted him to be happy, and she did love him. And you could tell that he loves her too. But, I mean, wrestling was his love. He was beautiful Bob Remus in Vancouver and Pacific Northwest Wrestling, I believe for Don Owen, if I remember right. In Japan, he had long drives. The daughter was born, I believe, while they were in Vancouver. He got the idea from D.I., which was a film in 1957. I saw some of it. I never saw all of it. And then Soldiers in the Rain, a Sergeant Slaughter name is where that came from. The Dudley Do-Right cartoon clips. Rocky and Bullwinkle was always a weird one. Always a weird one, like a wraparound cartoon show. The Dudley Do-Right, yeah, and then they did a live-action version. Christ knows why, because it was terrible. It wasn't any better than the Rocky and Bullwinkle version. And he went to Kansas City. He was doing well there, but then his mom got sick. This was the tough part. His mother gained sick. Fuck cancer. She had chemo, was seemingly getting better. And Vern had contacted him and said, hey, the guy playing Super Destroyer, who... Is that Bill Eadie? I'm trying to remember who the first Super Destroyer was. I think it might have been Bill Eadie, but I know he was a mass superstar, so I don't know. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But he wanted him to become, Super Destroyer 2. And Sarge is like, well, I'm still in wrestling, but I got to take care of my mom. I got to take care of the family business, the roofing business that the dad had after moving to Minneapolis. And he said, well, I've got an 8-passenger plane. We don't work all the time. They work 16 to 18 days a month. And it was pretty major markets. I mean, there were a few spot shows with major markets. So he could be home more. So he's able to do that. He was able to spend time with his family. Spend time with his daughters. I think both of his daughters were born by that point. At least one was. And he's talking to his mother. Oh, and she had the glow around her. And she said, Bob, I see the light go into the light. That was tough. That was a great happy moment. She was able to go peacefully. I mean, that was good. Again, fuck cancer. I mean, that was tough. That was really tough. They became Super Destroyer number 2. He met Pat Patterson. First sojourn to WWE. He had other stints at this point. I'm trying to remember kind of where all that stuff went. 1980, the Grand Wizard. Yes, that was Ernie Roth's actual name, believe it or not. He died in 84, I want to say. You can't tell why. I think it had something to do with cigar smoking. But anyway, the fans hated Sergeant Slaughter. They also hated the Grand Wizard because he was named the Grand Wizard. Bit of connotation there, even though he wasn't dressed like one. Bruce Pritchard was the spokesman for Vince, the hand puppet, as it were, the meat puppet. And yeah, guy's a moron. Guy's a goddamn moron. So he was a normal guy in the locker room, Sarge was, but when that light went on, he was Sarge. So he was normal to his family. His wife was even like stern, like, no, Sarge doesn't live here. Bob lives here. And that's good. That's good. The Gomer chant started, and that came from Andy Griffith. Where's Otis? He's not in his cell. I shut him. You, what? Now we got him doing the Emmett's Fixer Shop to fix Emmett. Yeah, I couldn't help but say that. He feuded with Pat Patterson. We had the alley fight. It wasn't a boot camp match because I think he had those with Iron Sheik, but that was May 4th, 1981. That was really what helped elevate Sarge, even though he had done well by that point and had been a hated heel. He did great there, and he might have worked a little bit more before going to Crockett. The roar of the crowd was insane. I mean, that's one of the matches I can go back and watch and appreciate some of the matches from that era, and this doesn't go for just WWF at the time, because I think they were still WWF, or maybe they changed that in 1980. Nevertheless, in 82, Vince was taking over and stuff like that, using company profits and taking all that away from his dad and whatnot, but nevertheless, He then had got the suggestion from Vince Sr. to go to Crockett. The old adage, Cornette said, "How can I miss you if you won't go away?" The Crockett TV. He mentioned how he was stabbed 4 times while he was in WWF. Cars are broken into. He had the camo limo. It's a good way to stay hidden there by not staying hidden at all. And he took Colonel Nelson, and he took Don Kernodle. And they said Jim Crockett was the owner of Crockett Promotions from 73 to 89. He sold to Ted Turner in late October of 88. Late October, early November. I forget exactly when they signed it. So, Slaughter and Kernodle team up. That was glossed over because they had a great series of matches with, I believe, Steamboat and Youngblood. But they talked about Jay Youngblood. Oh boy, they would have had to have really talked about some things. A great talent, but self-destructive. And he's talking to Vince Sr. because Vince Sr. still was around, even though Vince Jr. had taken control of the company. And he said, "Want to bring it back, great heel." He's like, "Well, if you see me as a, or bring him back as a villain, rather. If you see me as a villain, you'll see me as a hero." So then we gloss over briefly the Iranian hostage crisis, feud with the Iron Sheik. I'm glad they include a little bit of interview footage with Sheiky. Rest in peace, Sheik. Quite a character, shall we say. And January 24th, 1984, the day after Hulk Hogan beat the Iron Sheik for the championship. And they had a face-off. That was good. Sheik talked about how facing Slaughter was great. And this was in 2022. This had to have been right near the end of his life. Because he was looking rough. I mean, he'd done a lot of stuff to himself, and the fact that he made it into his 80s was a miracle. But brawl in the back, Vince was on camera, wrestlers face and heel alike are trying to separate this goddamn thing because they battled in the ring, battled in the back. That was good stuff. Bob Costas talked about how him and the NBC people treat it as real, know that the Iron Sheik won't be able to get out of this, and maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Bob Costas is always entertaining and strikes me as sometimes messing with the facts. I don't know, I wasn't there. But the media blitz, not the ballroom blitz, Slaughter being on talk shows, the crowd reactions, you couldn't go anywhere. Carnegie, I believe that was the deli shop, went to a book signing. People were just there like a bookstore. People were going nuts. I love the footage. I did wish that they had gone more into the stuff about, former, disgraced President Ronald Reagan. You want to talk about somebody that fucked up this country? There you go. But he told this story on a Legends Around Table thing. I think it was one about patriotism, if I remember right. I don't know what season that was because they break it down to seasons on the cock. But he talks about, Reagan. I think Reagan had just gotten his second term going, and that Reagan really liked him because he was patriotic, all this stuff. Or maybe he was in the midst of trying to get reelected. Whatever the case. His wife was there. He talks about how, he got to meet him. But he went into that story really well and even got to meet former, President Nixon. So I would recommend you guys check that out for a little bit more background on that particular thing. Because you might be confused, like, what? He met Reagan, but what? I want to know more. Well, there you are. And that was kind of cool. And then he was, he talked about various issues. He has still stuff with the lazy eye. He kept the character going. He never served in the military. That's one thing he made clear, but he kept kayfabe going. That came back to bite him in the ass later. I do not blame Sarge. I do not blame him. He was playing a character. The daughters, chime in. This was nice stuff with the family. The Tuesday Night Titans footage. The daughters missed him and vice versa. 300 days a year, so the wife was home a lot taking care of the kids. And even though he would make sure to let them know that he cared, and even on the days he was home, he did his best to support them. And you could tell he loves his family, and they love him. They wrestling was his mistress, and that Slaughter, I believe he was at some event, I forget where, it might have been in New York. And that Sheik pulled out a foreign object while the family was watching in the crowd, and Slaughter got busted open, got juice. And Diane was not very happy. That's one of the reasons why she didn't like the business. And then December of 84, around that time, he got the offer from Hasbro to become the first living G.I. Joe character. And then Vince had this deal with LJN to be a conflict of interest. So, unfortunately, Slaughter, sometime in early '85, it was right before WrestleMania, he had to he made his exit because he knew this would be important for his career. Now, you could argue that had Slaughter stayed in the company, he would have been successful. There's no doubt that he would have, because he was super over, wrestling, having wrestled the Sheik, was close in popularity to Hogan. I don't know if it would have been Slaughtermania, but Slaughter might have had the title run at some point. But he made the right decision with the G.I. Joe stuff. The stuff, the G.I. Joe movie. I remember that. I need to review that at some point. The lasers and not bullets, because we couldn't let that shit fly in the 80s. Let the cocaine fly, but God damn it, we can't show bullets. We gotta show lasers, because lasers are so much less deadly than bullets. God, the 80s are weird. But in the garage, all the memorabilia, the G.I. Joe memorabilia, I had a little bit of it, but, the one thing that I do remember about my childhood is, and my parents, hardworking, my dad was super supportive, and everybody did the best they could, but I didn't need everything, because I'm not saying I was the best kid, I'm not saying I was the absolute best kid in the world, but I understood in retrospect that, there were certain things that were worth having. Family is important, utilities, and having a roof over your head is a lot more important than having every single toy. And if only other kids thought that way. But yeah, all the G.I. Joe toys, that was some great stuff. The video game, he had his own album, made an appearance on Super Mario Bros. Super Show with, former, talent Captain Lou Albano as Mario Brothers. The rap is in your head. Be honest. That bullshit rap theme is in your head. I also apologize if the lighting seems a little bit off. We're having some sun cloud stuff, so it's affecting certain things. Nevertheless, he had a cameo in the Bad Guys movie, or Bad Guys, not the Bad Guys, not that cel-shaded bullshit animated movie that came out either last year or before. I don't remember what year it came out. I think it was 2022. I tried to put that movie out of my head. And then various meetings with celebrities, stock footage, or stock, photos, like Robin Leach. I'm screaming and I don't know why. Lifestyles of the rich and famous. And he even did the indie circuit. And then he got a call from the AWA where he could promote G.I. Joe. Couldn't do the stuff with, because they had Remco action figures in '85. But at that point, they weren't going to have much of anything going on. So the AWA at that point, when Slaughter came in, they were going downhill fast. I mean, they would be mildly successful in '86. By '87, '88, they were dying horribly. He did a lot of charity work. He was able to be home more often, be there for his daughters, recitals, games, all of that. And he was mad at Vince, didn't watch the brand for a number of years, missed out on the first 6 WrestleManias. I really do think that Vince should have actually found a way to make it work, but conflict of interest, pal. Again, I'm trying not to do the Vince impression too much because, the pest, and the fact that he, Rita Chatterton and all that stuff, and other things. But the Hasbro deal expired. It wasn't the Sarge wasn't worth the money. They wanted to go in a different direction. Vince calls him, knowing the deal's up. It's odd that he would know that. And Vince had this idea, this pitch. It's going to be you and Hogan. He's going to quit the company if he doesn't get to work with you. We're going to go to the LA Memorial Coliseum, about 105,000 people for WrestleMania 7. Slaughter's in. How are you going to turn Hogan heel? Hogan's not going bad. You are. And Slaughter was a great heel. He was. Arguably, he was a better heel than he was a face, even though he's a real nice guy. But Hogan says, I was in Vince's ear all the time to bring Slaughter back. Well, you clearly weren't doing a good job, Hogan, if it took like 6 damn years. Or 5.5, but whatever. Back as a villain. Vignettes of basically him saying that his country's gone soft. The Iraqi war on Kuwait, where they attacked the heavy Kuwait champion of the world and almost kicked the Shiite out of him. I'm sorry. I had to do that MXC line. I mean, I'm not sorry. Sarge was so hated, we brought in Sheik, or they brought in Sheik out and on El Casey. I said we because I wrote down we in quotations because That's the company saying it. Yeah, Sheikh Adnan al-Qaisi, who actually went to school with Saddam Hussein. And they photoshopped a limo driver standing next to him. They photoshopped Saddam Hussein standing over him. And there you are. So, that got a lot of people upset. The WWF basically they disavow anything the Slaughter's doing, and his views do not reflect ours. Then they had an article by Mark Madden. I assume it's the same Mark Madden, and I'm shocked that he can even form words, and that he shows that he has a heart, because Mark Madden was born without a heart. I mean, fuck, take a look at the guy. Take a listen to his commentary. And if you don't want to pull your eardrums out, there you are. So, death threats, all this stuff. This was talked about in the patriotism episode, and probably another one, I think, if I remember right. He was talking about one like being a villain. Vince had security for Sarge's family. His wife wasn't very happy, and this, unfortunately, would be something that would lead to the dissolvement of their marriage. Partly because she was frustrated with the business, partly because she was frustrated always being alone. And you can't blame her. Yeah, you marry into that, but at some point, like, it had been going... They got married in 1970. This is 1991. Late 90, early 91. So, ticket sales for Mania 7 weren't doing all that well. So Ventura came up with the idea, hey, let's burn the American flag. Sarge said, no, I'll burn Hogan's shirt. Arguably, that was a better idea. Not just because of advertising, but I think it got more anger because Hogan at that point was still over. So, Sarge wanted to break Mania 3's record of 93,173. There's no way that number was manufactured. But the ticket sales didn't go well. This is the closest they've come to admitting in one of their pieces, working with another company or not, that the reason that it didn't work is because people were not buying into it. Yes, people hated Sarge when he beat Warrior for the title. That was a big goddamn deal. That was a big goddamn deal. I remember hating it as a 10-year-old. I had just turned 10 9 days before. I saw the pay-per-view at a friend's house because his uncle ordered them, and because he was a big wrestling fan. I don't know whatever happened to that guy because I lost contact with that friend sometime in high school. But anyway, ticket sales not going well. The cost of security. Just admit that you fucked up and that nobody was going to bother to watch this. Yes, they'd sold 12 to 15,000 tickets. That's why they went to the LA Memorial Sports Arena. Or not the LA Memorial, the LA Sports Arena. From the LA Memorial Coliseum. I flummoxed those two things. Mania 7 had a hell of an atmosphere in the LA Sports Arena. I mean, I will say that. Arguably the best moment of that was Savage and Elizabeth reuniting, and no one is crying over that. Shut up. Hogan won, the crowd blew, and the divorce happened soon after. Because fans still weren't happy about all this, and the Slaughter-Hogan feud had continued through the summer. They skipped over SummerSlam 91. Smart, because Ultimate Warrior held up Vince for money. You know, after getting more money than he ever fucking deserved. Even if he was a draw, he was an idiot. But I don't blame his wife for divorcing. I don't blame Slaughter for being crushed by the whole thing. And he wants his country back. They skipped over his indie dates. They went right into his commissionership because he was actually part of Mania 8 in like an 8-man tag. And he was part of, I think, the AWF initial tapings, if I remember right. Which did not work at all. He helped, create the Yokozuna character for Rodney Anoa'i because Vince had so many Samoans. He looked over talent tapes. He helped discover Waltman, who became the 1-2-3 Kid. Taz even got a tryout, I think, sometime in late 92, early 93, when he was the Tazmaniac, the Smoking Guns, and so on. All the charity work that he did. This was some good stuff. They stretched this part out a little bit. This is why I kind of wish they had gone maybe a little bit more into his territorial run. Because this is where it started to drag. And I'm glad they showed the human side of him. I'm not complaining. I don't know. I think they could have probably shown more territorial stuff. But he took a stunner from Austin while commissioner, the DX stuff. He gave a lot of advice. Miz even said that he was good at giving him advice. Hall of Fame 2004 induction, mentioned his ex-wife. That's where I forgot, actually, that they had divorced years before. Because I assumed that they were married. But then again, I was a kid back in 91. And also, the Hall of Fame 2004 induction is 20 years old this year. And various media appearances, G.I. Joe convention, all the stuff. He talked about how he has more time for his family. And he still travels a bit, but he will cancel something rather than, miss time with his family, grandkids, all that. He has a happy life, a happy not wife, but they're happy together. And they never remarried. They still care for each other. And that's good. That proves that, I guess, love conquers all. I guess that's what it proves. And, man, Sarge kept taking it on the chin. I'm sorry I had to say it. That being said, pretty decent biography overall. I actually really enjoyed this one for the most part. Next week is Scott Hall because the Oscars are that particular night. If I had to delay that one, I do apologize because I watch a lot of movies that were nominated for Oscars. Some that deserved it and some that got way too many despite being technically well made. They were boring. Oppenheimer. Nevertheless, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rickland. I'll see you soon.